A deer walked into a schoolyard alone. Then students noticed something moving nearby. The first student to see the deer was a quiet 12-year-old girl named Emma Lawson, who had stayed behind near the fence after recess because she had dropped one of her colored pencils in the grass. It was a cold Tuesday morning in early spring, the kind of morning when the sun looked warm but the air still carried winter in its teeth. Maple Ridge Elementary sat at the edge of a small town in northern Vermont, where the playground backed onto a strip of woods and the woods rolled down toward a creek, old farms, and miles of hills beyond that. Deer were not unusual there. Children saw them sometimes at the edge of the soccer field, especially in the early morning before the buses arrived. But this deer was different. She did not stay near the woods. She walked straight into the schoolyard. Emma froze with the pencil in her hand. The deer was a doe, slender and brown, with long legs that trembled slightly as she stepped across the wet grass. Her coat looked dull, and patches of dried mud clung to her sides. She moved slowly, not grazing, not running, not startled by the squeals of children on the playground. Her ears flicked forward and back, and her dark eyes scanned the yard with a strange, desperate focus. Emma had always loved animals, but she knew enough not to approach wild ones. Her father was a park ranger, and he had told her many times that animals who seemed calm around people might actually be sick, injured, or frightened beyond normal behavior. Still, the doe did not look sick exactly. She looked like she was searching. Emma took one step backward. "Mrs. Palmer," she called, her voice barely above a whisper. Her teacher, Laura Palmer, was standing near the basketball court, watching a group of fourth graders argue over whether a shot had counted. She turned when she heard Emma's voice and saw the girl pointing toward the far side of the playground. At first, Laura did not understand what she was seeing. Then the deer stepped fully into view. "Everyone stop," Laura said. A few children kept running. Her voice sharpened. "Everyone freeze." That got their attention. The playground noise faded almost instantly, replaced by the creak of swing chains and the distant hum of traffic beyond the front of the school. Children turned one by one, their faces shifting from confusion to wonder. A deer stood near the kickball field, alone, in the middle of recess. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then a boy named Tyler whispered, "Whoa!" The doe lifted her head at the sound. She looked toward the children, then toward the woods, then back again. Instead of fleeing, she took several more steps into the yard. That was when Laura noticed the blood. Not much. Just a thin, dark line near the doe's front shoulder, half hidden beneath the muddy fur. The animal's breathing was fast. Her sides fluttered. Every few steps, her left front leg dipped as if it hurt to bear weight. Laura's heart tightened. "Slowly," she said to the children, keeping her voice calm. Everyone walked toward the doors, no running, no shouting. "But she's hurt," Emma said. "I know. That's why we need to give her space." The doe took another step forward. Several children gasped. Behind Laura, the playground aide, Mr. Hanley, hurried over. He was a retired bus driver with a silver beard and the calm, practical manner of a man who had spent 30 years managing noisy children before sunrise. "Is that deer coming toward us?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Laura said. "Get the front office. Tell them to call animal control and the game warden." Mr. Hanley nodded and started herding the nearest students toward the building. But Emma did not move. She was still watching the deer, not the wound, not the trembling legs, the deer's eyes. The doe kept looking back toward the trees, again and again. It was subtle at first. A turn of the head, a pause, a flick of the ears toward the woods. Then she would look at the children, take another step into the schoolyard, and turn back again. Emma felt a cold shiver move down her arms. "Mrs. Palmer?" she whispered. "She wants us to look over there." Laura did not take her eyes off the doe. "Emma, inside." "No, look. She keeps looking back." The doe stopped near the edge of the blacktop. Her legs shook. She lowered her head, then lifted it again and made a soft, breathy sound. Not a bleat exactly. Something quieter, something broken. Then she turned toward the woods once more. This time, several students saw it. "She's looking at something," Tyler said. "Maybe there's another deer," said a girl named Sophie. "Maybe a baby," Emma whispered. The word changed the air. A baby. Laura looked toward the woods. At first, she saw nothing but bare branches, wet leaves, and the dark tangle of brush near the fence. The schoolyard fence was old chain link, high enough to keep children in, but low enough in places for deer to jump if they had to. Beyond it, the land sloped toward a drainage ditch that carried rainwater into the creek. The doe took 2 more steps, then stopped. She did not come closer. She waited. Laura felt the first true flicker of fear, because animals usually ran from playgrounds. This one had walked into a school full of children. Not because she was unafraid, because something was stronger than fear. "Inside," Laura repeated, firmer this time. "All students inside now." Most of the children obeyed, moving in a quiet, nervous group toward the double doors. Emma walked slowly, still looking over her shoulder. Tyler and Sophie did the same. Then Tyler stopped. "Something moved," he said. Laura turned sharply. "Tyler, keep walking." "No, seriously, by the fence." Everyone looked. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then, beyond the chain-link fence near the drainage ditch, a patch of leaves shifted. Small, brown, almost invisible. Emma gasped. "There!" The doe heard the gasp and turned toward the movement immediately. She stepped toward the fence, then stumbled. Her front legs buckled and she nearly fell before catching herself. From beyond the fence came a tiny sound, a thin, frightened cry. Laura's breath caught. Not one of the children spoke. The leaves moved again, and this time they saw it clearly. A tiny fawn no larger than a medium dog struggling in the mud beside the ditch. Its spotted coat blended almost perfectly with the dead leaves. One of its back legs was caught in something near the fence line, maybe a twisted piece of wire or broken plastic netting left behind from old erosion fencing. Every time it tried to rise, it slipped back into the mud. The doe had walked into the schoolyard because her fawn was trapped, and she could not free it alone. Mr. Hanley returned from the building with Principal Denise Carter just as the first cry reached the blacktop. Denise was a tall woman in her 50s with cropped gray hair and a reputation for being calm during fire drills, snow closures, stomach flu outbreaks, and angry parents. But when she saw the doe standing in the playground and heard the small cry beyond the fence, her face changed. "Oh my God," she whispered. Laura quickly explained. Denise did not waste time. "Children inside, all of them. Lock the playground doors once they're in. Laura, stay with me. Mr. Hanley, get cones and keep everyone away from the windows if you can. I don't want half the school screaming at the glass." "What about the fawn?" Emma asked. Denise looked down and realized Emma was still there. "Emma Lawson, inside?" "My dad is a ranger," Emma said quickly. "He can help." "We are calling the game warden." "My dad can get here faster. He's working at the state trail today. That's 10 minutes away." Denise hesitated. The fawn cried again. The doe stepped toward the fence and pressed her nose against the metal, desperate but unable to understand the barrier. The children watching from the doorway murmured in distress. Denise looked at Emma. "Call him from the office, now." Emma ran. Within minutes, the entire school seemed to know something was happening, despite every adult's attempt to keep things calm. Faces appeared at classroom windows. Teachers pulled blinds halfway down. The secretary called the game warden, then the local police non-emergency line, then Emma's father after Emma's trembling explanation made it clear she could barely speak. Outside, the doe remained near the fence. She did not run. She did not charge. She simply stood there, injured and trembling, while her trapped fawn cried on the other side. Laura watched from a distance with Denise. The situation was delicate and dangerous. A frightened doe could injure herself trying to jump the fence. If adults approached the fawn too quickly, the mother might panic and hurt herself or someone else. If they waited too long, the fawn might injure its leg further or slip into the water collecting in the ditch. The sky darkened with the threat of more rain. The doe lowered her head and pushed at the fence with her nose. "Easy," Laura whispered, though she knew the animal could not understand her. "We see it. We see your baby." 10 minutes later, Emma's father arrived. Ranger Caleb Lawson pulled into the school parking lot in a green state truck, gravel popping under the tires. He stepped out wearing his field jacket, mud already on his boots, and moved with the controlled urgency of someone used to emergencies in places where panic could make things worse. Emma saw him through the office window and ran to the front doors. "Dad!" He caught her by the shoulders. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. The fawn is stuck. The mom came to get help." Caleb looked past her toward the playground. "Show me." Denise met him at the doors. "The game warden is on the way. Animal control, too." "Good," Caleb said. "Until then, nobody touches anything unless the fawn is in immediate danger." They walked quickly to the playground, stopping well back from the doe. Caleb studied the scene. The mother deer stood inside the schoolyard near the fence. The fawn was outside the fence, down the slope near the ditch, tangled in a piece of old orange construction mesh partly buried in mud. The mesh had wrapped around the fawn's rear leg and snagged on a broken metal fence post near the ground. The more the fawn struggled, the tighter it twisted. Caleb's jaw tightened. "Old erosion netting," he said. "I hate that stuff." "Can you free it?" Denise asked. "Yes, but not while the doe is between us and the fence." As if hearing him, the doe turned. Her eyes met Caleb's. He froze. The animal looked exhausted, not tame, not calm, not safe. But there was something in her gaze that made even Caleb, who had spent years reminding people not to romanticize wildlife, fall silent. She was terrified, and she had come anyway. Caleb took off his hat slowly and lowered his body posture. "All right, Mama," he said softly. "We're going to help." The doe flicked her ears. Emma stood behind the door with several classmates watching through the narrow window. Her hands were clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. "Please don't let the baby die," Sophie whispered beside her. Emma did not answer. She kept her eyes on her father. Caleb explained the plan to Denise and Laura. The students had to remain inside. The doe needed a clear path away from the playground if she chose to retreat. They would open the side maintenance gate near the woods, then slowly back away, giving the mother a route out of the schoolyard toward the fawn. If she moved away from the fence even briefly, Caleb could approach from the outside path and cut the netting. But the doe had no intention of leaving the fence. When Mr. Hanley opened the side gate, the doe looked at it, then back at the fawn. She stayed. Rain began to fall again, not hard, just a cold drizzle that darkened the blacktop and clung to the doe's fur. The fawn shivered in the mud. Its cries became weaker. Caleb looked at the sky. "We can't wait." The game warden, Officer Marissa Vale, arrived just then with a wildlife response kit and a calm, serious expression. She was in her early 40s with dark hair pulled into a braid and sharp eyes that took in every detail quickly. She listened to Caleb's summary, then looked at the doe. "Sedating her would be risky," Marissa said quietly. "Too much stress, and if she goes down in the wrong place, we have a bigger problem." Caleb nodded. "Agreed." "What's the fawn's condition?" "Trapped rear leg, cold, weakening, still alert." Marissa looked toward the school windows where dozens of small faces disappeared quickly as teachers pulled them back. "We need screens, blankets, anything to block the doe's view for a few seconds without frightening her more." Denise turned immediately. "Gym mats?" "Perfect." Within minutes, 2 custodians and Mr. Hanley brought out several blue folding gym mats. Moving slowly, they positioned them along part of the fence line, creating a visual barrier between the doe and the rescuer's approach route. The doe snorted and stepped back, tense but did not bolt. Laura stood near the school door, heart pounding, ready to retreat if the deer panicked. Caleb and Marissa moved outside the schoolyard, down the slope toward the ditch. The mud sucked at their boots. The fawn saw them and struggled weakly. "Easy," Caleb murmured. "Don't fight it." The doe heard the movement and tried to see around the mats. She paced the fence, ears high, nostrils flaring. Inside the school, the students were silent. Even the kindergarten hallway had gone quiet. Emma watched from the office window, tears sliding down her cheeks. Her father was now kneeling in the mud beside the fawn. Marissa held a blanket between him and the fawn's head to reduce visual stress. Caleb took a pair of trauma shears from his pocket and began cutting the plastic mesh. The fawn kicked suddenly. Caleb jerked back just in time to avoid being struck. The doe lunged toward the fence. The children gasped. Marissa raised her voice, firm but low. "Hold position. Everyone hold." The doe struck the fence lightly with one front hoof, then stopped, trembling. Caleb waited until the fawn stilled. "It's okay," he said. "Almost there." The mesh was tighter than it looked. It had twisted around the small leg several times, cutting into the skin but not deeply enough to sever anything. Caleb cut one loop, then another. Mud covered his hands. Rain ran down his face. The fawn's breathing came in frantic little bursts. "Last wrap," he said. The fawn cried. The doe answered. Caleb slipped 2 fingers beneath the final strand to protect the leg and cut it free. "Got it." Marissa pulled the netting away. For 1 second, the fawn did not move. Then it tried to stand and collapsed. Emma sobbed from behind the glass. Caleb quickly checked the leg. "No break that I can feel. Circulation good. It's weak." Marissa nodded. "Back away. Give the mother room." They retreated up the slope slowly, carrying the cut netting with them. Mr. Hanley and the custodians removed the gym mats and stepped back toward the building. The doe saw the fawn. Everything stopped. She stood inside the schoolyard, separated from her baby by the chain-link fence. The side maintenance gate was still open, but it was several yards away. For a moment, the doe seemed too exhausted, too frightened, or too confused to understand. Then the fawn cried. The doe turned and ran toward the open gate. She stumbled once, recovered, and leaped through the gap into the strip of grass beyond the playground. She crossed the slope in 3 bounds, mud flying beneath her hooves, and reached the fawn. The students watching from inside erupted into whispers and muffled cries. The doe lowered her head and touched the fawn all over, face, neck, back, leg. She licked mud from its side. She nudged it gently, then more firmly. The fawn tried to rise again, front legs shaking, back legs folding beneath it. "Come on," Emma whispered. "Please." The doe nudged again. The fawn pushed up. For a heartbreaking moment, it stood on trembling legs, then nearly fell. The mother pressed her body close, steadying it. The fawn leaned against her side, weak but alive. Even Marissa smiled. But then Caleb noticed something moving near the brush. At first, he thought it was another student's reflection in a window or a branch shifting in the rain. Then the leaves near the ditch trembled. Something small and spotted stumbled out from behind a clump of grass. A second fawn. Laura saw it too. "There's another one." The schoolyard fell silent again. The second fawn was not trapped, but it looked dangerously weak. It had hidden so well in the leaves that no one had noticed it. Its tiny body trembled with cold, and it took only 2 steps before sinking to its knees in the wet grass. The doe turned sharply. She had not led them to 1 baby. She had led them to 2. The first fawn pressed against her side. The second cried from the brush. The doe looked between them, frantic. Caleb cursed softly under his breath. "Twins!" Marissa moved carefully closer, then stopped when the doe's ears snapped toward her. "The second one may be hypothermic." "We need to warm it," Caleb said, "and the mother may not let us." The doe stood between the rescuers and the second fawn now, trembling with indecision. She could not move both babies at once. One had just been freed. The other was collapsing. She had done the only thing she could think to do, bring help. But help was still human, and humans were danger too. Emma suddenly pulled away from the office window and ran toward the front desk. "Call my dad," she told the secretary. "He's outside, honey." "His phone. Call him." The secretary hesitated, then dialed. Caleb answered with one muddy hand. Emma. Dad, she said, voice shaking. Remember when we found that baby rabbit under the shed? Caleb frowned. Emma, not now. You said we had to make the mom feel safe enough to come back. His eyes moved from the doe to the second fawn. Emma continued quickly. Can you move away and let her try first? Caleb closed his eyes for half a second. His daughter was right. Human urgency sometimes pushed too close. Good thinking, Em, he said softly. Stay inside. He ended the call and turned to Marissa. We back off more. Give her space to collect the second. Marissa considered the fawn. If it can't stand? Then we step in, but first let her try. They moved farther up the slope, almost to the schoolyard fence. Everyone else stayed still. The doe waited, watching them. Then she moved to the second fawn. She licked it vigorously, nudged its shoulder, and gave soft sounds that none of the children had ever heard before. The fawn lifted its head weakly. The first fawn, still trembling but standing, wobbled after its mother. The doe nudged the second fawn again. It tried to stand, failed, tried again, failed. The doe's movements became more urgent. Marissa's expression darkened. We may have to intervene. Give it one more minute, Caleb said. The doe lowered her head and pushed the fawn's body gently but firmly, rolling it out of the coldest mud and closer to the grass. Then she stood over it, shielding it from the rain with her body as best she could. The fawn shook violently. Caleb knew they could not wait. Now, Marissa said. The plan changed quickly. They would not remove the fawn unless absolutely necessary, because taking a fawn from a mother who was present could cause terrible stress and separation. Instead, they would approach with a thermal blanket, place it near and partially over the fawn, and retreat. If the doe tolerated that, they might assess further. It was risky. Caleb moved first, slow and low, carrying the folded emergency blanket. Marissa stood ready with another blanket as a visual shield. The doe faced him, ears forward, one hoof lifting. Easy, Caleb whispered. I'm not taking your baby. Inside the school, Emma could barely breathe. Caleb placed the blanket on the ground and slid it toward the second fawn without touching the animal. The silver material crinkled softly. The doe flinched but did not charge. Caleb backed away immediately. The doe sniffed the blanket, then the fawn. The fawn shifted. Warmth began to reflect back toward its tiny body. Several minutes passed. Then the second fawn lifted its head. The children watching from inside began whispering encouragement as if the fawn could hear them. Come on. You can do it. Stand up. Please. The doe nudged again. The second fawn pushed with its front legs. Its back legs wobbled, slipped, then found the ground. It stood. A sound went through the school like wind. Not quite a cheer because teachers shushed it quickly, but something full of relief and wonder. The doe did not wait. With both fawns now on their feet, she began leading them toward the woods, moving slowly, stopping every few steps to make sure they followed. The first fawn limped slightly but kept close. The second stumbled often, but each time the mother returned, nudged it and waited. At the tree line, the doe paused. She looked back toward the schoolyard, toward the building, toward the children pressed behind windows. For one long moment, no one moved. Then the doe turned and disappeared into the woods with both fawns behind her. The school remained silent even after they were gone. Then Emma began to cry. So did Sophie. Tyler wiped his eyes and insisted it was rain from the window, even though he was inside. By lunchtime, the entire town had heard about the deer that walked into the schoolyard for help. Parents called. News traveled through social media. The local paper asked for interviews, but Principal Carter refused to let anyone turn the children into a spectacle. Instead, she gathered the students in the gym after lunch and spoke to them quietly. What happened today was extraordinary, she said, but it was also a reminder. Wild animals are not pets. We do not chase them. We do not touch them. We do not try to rescue them without trained adults. What helped those fawns today was not excitement. It was calm. It was listening. It was noticing. She looked toward Emma, who sat near the front with red eyes. Some of you noticed that the doe kept looking back. That mattered. Some of you stayed quiet when you wanted to shout. That mattered too. Emma looked down at her hands. She did not feel like a hero. She felt small, shaky, and grateful. That evening, Caleb took Emma back to the school after everyone had gone home. The rain had stopped. The playground was empty except for puddles reflecting the pale sky. Near the fence, mud still showed the marks of hooves, boots, and the place where the fawn had struggled. Caleb crouched and picked up a piece of the cut orange netting. "This stuff should never have been left here," he said. Emma stood beside him. "Could it trap other animals?" "Yes." "Then we should clean it up." Caleb smiled faintly. "I thought you might say that." Over the next week, Maple Ridge Elementary started a project that grew far beyond what anyone expected. With Caleb's guidance, students and parents cleaned old plastic netting, broken fencing, fishing line, and trash from the woods behind the school. Marissa gave a presentation about wildlife-safe materials. The town maintenance department inspected drainage areas near playgrounds and parks. Teachers turned the rescue into lessons about habitat, responsibility, and how human objects can become dangerous in wild places. Emma's class made posters that said, "Notice before it's too late," and "Wildlife needs safe spaces too." Tyler drew a dramatic picture of the doe leading two fawns into the forest. Sophie wrote a poem titled "The Mother Who Asked Without Words." Even Mr. Hanley, who claimed he was too old for emotional wildlife events, built a small storage shed so future playground equipment would not leave debris near the fence. For several weeks, no one saw the doe again. Then, one morning in May, during the quiet before school started, Emma arrived early with her father. The grass was bright with dew, birds sang from the edge of the woods. Caleb had come to drop off supplies for the school's nature club, and Emma was helping carry a box of field guides when she stopped. Near the tree line stood the doe. She looked healthier now. Her coat had brightened. The wound near her shoulder had healed into a faint dark mark. Beside her stood two fawns, stronger and taller, their spotted coats glowing in the morning light. Emma gripped her father's sleeve. "Dad," she whispered, "I see them." The doe watched them. Caleb and Emma stayed perfectly still. One fawn lowered its head to nibble grass. The other looked toward the playground, ears flicking curiously. The doe touched each one with her nose, then raised her head again. Emma knew she should not imagine too much. Her father had taught her that wild animals did not return to say thank you the way people did. They followed food, safety, instinct, and paths older than roads or schools. But the doe had come to the edge of the yard, and for a moment Emma let herself believe she was showing them that both babies were alive. The doe turned and walked into the woods. The fawns followed. This time they did not stumble. Years later, Emma would remember that morning more clearly than almost anything else from 6th grade. She would remember the cold playground, the doe's trembling legs, the tiny cry from the ditch, and the second fawn no one had seen at first. She would remember her father kneeling in the mud and the whole school holding its breath behind the windows. She would remember the way the mother deer refused to leave until both of her babies could follow. And when people asked why Emma became a wildlife biologist, she would tell them about the deer that walked into her schoolyard alone. She wasn't alone, not really, Emma would say. That was the point. Her babies were hidden nearby, and she needed someone to notice what she couldn't say. Then she would tell them the lesson her father taught her that day. Animals don't speak our language, but that doesn't mean they're silent. The doe had spoken with her eyes, her steps, her refusal to run, and the way she kept looking back toward the place where her fawns were trapped. The students had noticed. The adults had listened. And because of that, two tiny lives walked back into the forest with their mother. So before we go, remember this. Sometimes the most important cry is the quietest one. Sometimes help begins when a child notices a movement in the leaves. And sometimes in the middle of an ordinary school day, the wild world steps into our own, asking not for fear, not for noise, but for attention, patience, and kindness.